The galaxy turned not with hope but with inertia. For millennia beyond reckoning, the high orders had sat enthroned within their crystalline citadels and ironclad fleets, gazing upon lesser species with detached judgment. The galactic sectors shimmered with ancient power, their hierarchies hardened like the bones of dead titans. Innovation had withered under the weight of protocol and pride. It was into this stagnant sea of stars that humanity was born, a flicker on a small blue world, unnoticed by the consortia, disregarded by the archives of sentience. The Archomagistrates of the Thalran Dominion, the Dreamlords of Surun, the Shard Barons of Trelvac Prime, all of them saw Earth, when they saw it at all, as a triviality, a backward blot where intelligence had barely stirred from mud and iron. Their mistake would cost them the galaxy. The first notice came not through war but curiosity. A survey probe of the Visari Technarchy, patrolling an insignificant corner of a fringe arm, intercepted human transmissions, pulses of chaotic noise, crackling with urgency and passion, nothing like the rigid data psalms of the orders. Intrigued and faintly amused, the Visari dispatched watcher fleets to the Sol system, expecting to find a primitive culture clanging sticks together around a fire. Instead, they found something far more dangerous. The humans had already seeded their system with machines. Bulky, imperfect, but brilliant in their own crude way, crewed by bold, reckless individuals who rode fusion-powered craft beyond their moon and toward their neighboring planets. They fought gravity, radiation, and cold death with nothing but ingenuity and sheer obstinacy. No central authority directed them. They bickered and divided, yet somehow progressed with an urgency unknown to the stagnant orders. The Council of Insight, ruling over dozens of more mature civilizations, received the Visari reports with detached interest. A new candidate for observation, perhaps conscription into minor service roles in the lower tiers of the orders. Certainly not a species that required intervention. Their world would be categorized, monitored, and quietly folded into the galactic margin, as had so many others before them. Alien eyes turned upon humanity with the same casual disdain that one might afford an unruly but harmless pet. And so the first mistake was made. The second came when a minor merchant clan, the Vrohal Combine, decided to establish clandestine contact for resource extraction. The humans had bountiful metals and primitive, but untapped energy wells in their asteroids and outer system, easy pickings for a technologically superior force. A small, sleek fleet slipped into Sol space under veiled drives, dispatching automated drones to negotiate with the dominant local factions. They expected compliance or bewilderment. They received missiles. Crude, fast, impossible weapons, nothing like the measured energy duels of the galactic norm. The Vrohal fleet was struck before they could properly react, their shielding systems never adapted for such kinetic violence. One of their heavy harvesters exploded into a blossom of fire, scattering debris across the void. In human control centers across Earth and Luna, the realization struck simultaneously. They were not alone, and whatever was out there could be fought. Humanity, in all its fragmented, reckless glory, did not crumble, it adapted. Within months, Earth's feuding nations and corporations forged frantic alliances, pooling resources in desperation and wonder. Industrial output soared, shipyards expanded into the belts. Every scrap of alien wreckage was pored over with ravenous curiosity, every scrap of data absorbed and retooled. Engineers, hackers, scientists, and generals became the architects of a frantic renaissance. They built not replicas of alien tech, but hybrids, systems refashioned with human instinct and brutality, armor plating welded from asteroid ores, railguns capable of spearing through the vacuum with devastating force, fusion torches turned into acceleration drives and kinetic lances. Above it all, the Terran Accord was born, not a unified government, but an agreement so primal and binding it needed no central authority. We will not kneel. Meanwhile, the Vrohal survivors limped back to the nearest trade nexus, their reports received with laughter and skepticism. The Combine leadership refused to believe that a species so low on the galactic evolutionary ladder could threaten them. A teaching expedition was authorized. Punitive forces were gathered, mercenaries, slave legions, aging warships fitted for intimidation, not battle. They entered Sol system expecting a quick suppression. Instead, they triggered a war that would burn across the stars. The first great battle took place in the shadow of Jupiter's maelstrom. The Vrohal fleet approached in strict formation, their drive plumes carefully calibrated to Project Authority. Human vessels, patched together and unpainted, looked like a scavenger's flotilla by comparison, but they moved with a vicious unpredictability that baffled Vrohal admirals. They ambushed, they feinted, they sacrificed. Human ships flung themselves into enemy formations with suicidal courage, punching through shield layers with massed projectile storms. When the Vrohal's electronic warfare systems attempted to jam human communications, they found themselves confounded by a chaotic, encrypted web of decentralized protocols that defied traditional disruption. The Battle of the Red Storm ended in a slaughter, the Vrohal slaughtered, rooted by the very primitives they had intended to humble. Humanity paid in blood and wreckage, but in victory, they claimed something greater, captured warships, captured technology, and most of all, captured fear. Across the orders, the news spread like ripples through a stagnant pond. Humans had defied expectation, humans had killed without remorse, humans had won. The Council of Insight convened in emergency session. The Dream Lords of Surun dispatched diplomatic envoys. The Thauran Dominion considered options for direct intervention. Across the million stars of the old galaxy, ancient minds turned their gaze more seriously toward the tiny world they had ignored for so long. For the first time in an age, the orders would not move at their own pace. They would have to react. And still, they misunderstood. They thought humans could be threatened, bought, or contained. They thought time was on their side. They had not yet seen what human hands could forge from the ruins of an old and tired galaxy. They had not yet understood that what they had taken for a backwater species was the hammer that would reshape the very stars themselves. The wreckage from Jupiter's shadow drifted for months, a silent testimony to a new era. Human recovery fleets scavenged tirelessly, dissecting alien technology with the ruthless hunger of a species denied their place among the stars. Engineers and scientists toiled in shipyards lit by the glow of Saturn's rings, refitting captured drives, grafting energy cores onto human frameworks, crafting vessels that were neither earthborn nor wholly alien. The Terran Accord, still fragile, held firm through the shared fires of necessity. Skirmishes broke out among old national factions, but they were quickly crushed by joint fleets carrying the Accord's new emblem, a stylized forge blazing across a black field. No longer merely nations, no longer merely tribes, humanity began to sense the scope of their destiny. Admiral Siang Ileana, a former naval officer turned fleetmaster, led the first outward expeditions. Her doctrine was simple: no defensive posture, no hiding behind Sol's gravity wells. Humanity would meet the galaxy head-on on ground of their own choosing. Her flagship, the TSV Bastion, a dreadnought built around a salvaged Vrohal core, became a symbol across Earth and Mars alike. Beyond Sol, the galaxy shifted uneasily. The Vrohal Combine, reeling from humiliation, petitioned the Council of Insight for retribution. They demanded a sanctioned cleansing of the upstart world, arguing that failure to act would embolden other lesser races. The Council hesitated. It was not cowardice that stayed their hand, but an ancient terror they dared not speak aloud. Throughout the long ages there had been others, species that rose too fast, burned too brightly. Each time the orders had suppressed them ruthlessly. But each suppression had come at a terrible cost, straining the delicate web of power across the known sectors. Now facing humanity's savage brilliance, the old memories stirred. Some advocated immediate eradication. Others, like the Dream Lords of Surun, counseled patience. Surunese philosophy taught that violent ascension was always self-limiting, that given enough rope, the primitives would destroy themselves without intervention. In the twilight halls of the Dream Lords, the decision was made, a policy of containment. Official delegations would be sent, trade treaties would be offered, technology carefully trickled. Human expansion would be nudged, steered into docility, lured by the sweet poison of inclusion. It was a mistake born of arrogance. When the Surun ambassadorial fleet arrived in Sol system, bearing gifts and gilded promises, they found Earth already changed. Cities bloomed not just across continents, but in orbit on the Moon, on Mars's dust-strewn plains. Massive engines howled at the Lagrange points, testing propulsion systems that distorted space itself. The humans welcomed the ambassadors politely, studied their treaties, sampled their gifts, and then politely, publicly rejected the terms. An envoy named Elise Vance, representing the Terran Accord at the Lunar Assembly, spoke before the gathered Surun delegation. Her words were broadcast across human and alien channels alike. "We are not a lesser house seeking entry into your council," she said. "We are not servants nor vassals, we are a sovereign forge. If you come to us with open hands, you will find friendship. If you come with chains, you will find a furnace." The declaration echoed across the stars. For the first time, a species not yet admitted to the Council of Insight had refused entry on their own terms. From the mist-wreathed throne worlds of the Thauran Dominion to the shattered citadels of the Red Syndicates, the galaxy shifted. Meanwhile, humanity pushed further. The outer expansion began. Warp lanes were mapped not through conventional gravity wells but by raw experimentation, trial and error, using techniques no sanctioned species had dared for millennia. Human navigators, often little more than daredevils with hastily adapted alien tech, blazed chaotic, unstable paths into unclaimed sectors. Where they found derelict stations or forgotten colonies, they salvaged. Where they found life, they negotiated or fought. Humanity had no central government to slow them, no codified doctrine to shackle them. Their fleets, their merchants, their explorers operated like a living swarm, adapting faster than any order could predict. But not all contact was victorious. The first true clash came at the edges of the Shard Baronies. The Barons of Trelvac Prime, crystalline beings whose very minds pulsed through light-refracting bodies, viewed humanity's unchecked advance as an abomination. They dispatched interdiction fleets, cold, ruthless squadrons of mirror ships armed with radiation lances and mass conversion beams. They offered no words, no negotiations. They attacked without warning at a fledgling human colony near Epsilon Eridani. The battle was brutal. Earth's defenders, still mastering the fusion of alien and human technologies, suffered grievous losses. The outpost was annihilated. Thousands perished screaming into the void. But the humans learned. In the aftermath, black box recorders and sensor arrays recovered from wreckage were dissected in hidden laboratories orbiting Mars. Scientists developed new composite materials resistant to the Baron's radiation attacks. Programmers broke the crystalline command codes, opening weaknesses in the seemingly impenetrable shard ships. When the Barons launched a second assault months later, they found a human trap waiting. At the Battle of Raven's Rift, a coordinated flotilla of human raiders, heavy cruisers, and modular gunships encircled and decimated the Baron task force. They used tactics no shard mind could comprehend, simulated cowardice, false retreats, feigned system failures. Where a shard Baron saw dishonor, a human saw opportunity. The victory was not merely tactical, it was philosophical. Humanity had proven they could absorb a blow, innovate at speed, and strike back harder. They would not simply survive among the stars, they would thrive. As word spread, fractures deepened within the Council of Insight. Younger species, long suppressed by the ancient orders, watched with mounting awe. Whispers grew in the undercurrents of galactic politics. Maybe, they murmured, the humans were not a threat, maybe they were a catalyst. An ancient darkness, however, stirred at the galaxy's edge. Far beyond the influence of the Council, in the forgotten ruin wastes of the Haveran expanse, something old and sleeping had begun to wake. Sensors aboard human exploratory fleets began to record anomalies, energy signatures that defied categorization, signals in the void that spoke not in languages, but in raw, mind-searing sensation. The forge had been lit. But in the depths beyond the stars, other fires smoldered, fires that cared nothing for humanity, nor for the orders, nor for anything born in the light of creation. The next phase of humanity's ascension would not be against simple foes. It would be against nightmares ancient when the stars were young. And human hands would have to forge not just ships and weapons, but the very soul of a new galactic destiny. The fracture lines beneath the Council of Insight widened with each Terran victory. The long-stagnant galactic order, built on millennia of quiet dominance and slow decay, began to splinter. Beneath their veneer of unity, the orders whispered and schemed. Meanwhile, humanity expanded like wildfire. In the iron fields of Proxima Centauri, orbital shipyards spun out heavy assault carriers based on designs no alien tactician could predict. At the twin gas giants of Delta Pavonis, human prospectors unearthed ancient alien ruins, vast, entombed vaults of unknown origin, their locked halls holding technologies that predated even the Thalran records. The Accord authorized the Phoenix Projects, a secretive division of scientists, tacticians, and engineers tasked with adapting these relics into usable tools of war and exploration. They operated beyond Earth's political squabbles, answering only to the Accord Assembly. One such artifact, the first key, an obsidian shard pulsating with non-Euclidean energy, became the cornerstone of humanity's greatest gamble yet, Project Gateway. But as humanity reached out further, they encountered more than just council enforcers and ancient ruins. They found allies. On the windswept worlds of the Shar Confederacy, an insected race once bound to the orders through treaties of servitude, envoys sent from the Accord found willing ears. The Shar remembered their centuries of degradation, of being denied advancement to preserve council supremacy. Their hives stirred at the tales of humanity's defiance at the promise of a new way. Pacts were sworn not in words but in blood and bond. Soon after, the Lithari tribes, silicon-based lifeforms from the molten moons of Velnar IX, sent their emissaries. They were ancient in their own right, but they had long chosen isolation after the Council forbade their weaponized geological experiments. Now, with human support, the Lithari rekindled their dormant arts. An undercurrent swelled across the stars, a rising, defiant tide. In response, the Council of Insight declared the Sol Mandate, a decree labeling humanity and any species aiding them as galactic insurgents. A purge fleet was assembled, the greatest armada mustered since the Sendar Wars 10,000 years prior. Admiral Siang Ileana, now Supreme Commander of the Accord's Joint Forces, received word of the incoming armada before it even crossed into human-influenced sectors. She did not wait for them. She moved to intercept. The Battle of the Broken Verge would be remembered as a turning point. The Council's fleets were vast, their formations perfect, their weaponry honed through centuries of doctrine. Their dreadnoughts shimmered with layered shielding, their squadrons maneuvered with unerring precision. But they faced a new enemy, an enemy that had learned from 1,000 setbacks and victories, an enemy whose every ship was a weapon of unpredictable design, whose every commander fought with vicious autonomy. Human squadrons struck like wolves, breaking the Council's rigid formations. Shar strikecraft wove chaotic webs of disruption fields. Lithari mass drivers reshaped the very asteroid fields into shifting death traps. Siang Ileana's flagship, TSV Bastion, plunged through the heart of the Council's central wedge, ripping apart command vessels with kinetic singularities developed by Phoenix Project researchers. By the battle's end, half the Council fleet lay wrecked or adrift, and the rest fled. The Council of Insight was broken, not destroyed, but bloodied in a way they had not been for epochs. The galaxy changed in a single sweep. Worlds long cowed by the Orders began to declare neutrality or even open rebellion. Trade guilds, minor sovereignties, and research enclaves once shackled by Council law now flooded toward the Terran Accord, seeking protection, partnership, and liberation. But amid the tides of victory, darker signs appeared. On the forgotten fringes where human scouts had vanished, entire star systems were found silent, planets stripped of atmosphere, stations cracked open like rotten fruit. No conventional force claimed responsibility. Fragments of recovered data spoke of impossible entities, vast, multidimensional constructs whose existence was hinted at in the oldest surviving star maps as the precursor graves. Project Gateway neared completion. Using the first key and auxiliary artifacts recovered from the Havran Expanse, human scientists stabilized a rift generator, a device capable of breaching controlled wormholes across massive interstellar distances. They intended to leap beyond the rim, to explore, to expand. But the final test rift, opened near the red dwarf system Ross 248, did not behave as expected. From the wound in space poured nightmares. The entities were not ships, they were not beings as humanity understood them. They were mobile singularities wrapped in lattices of impossible geometry, devouring matter, unraveling time around themselves. The first human defense fleets deployed to Ross 248 were annihilated before they could even fire a shot. The Accord Assembly convened in emergency session. Among them, voices of fear rose. Some argued for retreat, for sealing the rift and abandoning expansion beyond known sectors. But others, led by Elise Vance, spoke of a different future. "If we flee now," she said, "we abandon our place not just in this galaxy but in the destiny of all things. We are not children playing with fire, we are the fire." Humanity prepared for a new kind of war, one against an enemy beyond reason, beyond politics, beyond fear. The Orders, watching from their crumbling towers, dared not intervene. They whispered among themselves, realizing the galaxy's fate was no longer in their hands. The hammer that was humanity had been lifted. Now it would strike not just against corruption and stagnation, but against the ancient hunger that threatened to devour all. The forge of human hands burned brighter than ever. And the true reforging of the galaxy had only begun. The rift at Ross 248 widened. What had begun as a narrow puncture of unspace now seethed across the system like a bleeding wound. The entities that emerged defied sensor readings and comprehension alike, no stable mass signature, no predictable energy emissions. They shifted form constantly, vast fields of collapsing light and devouring void, unraveling reality around them wherever they drifted. In the orbitals of Mars, the Accord Assembly declared the Crisis Resolution Directive, humanity's first true war of survival against an existential threat. The old treaties with the Shar Confederacy and the Lithari tribes were deepened into a formal union, the Free Nexus Accord. Together, they vowed that extinction would not be their fate. Project Gateway, once a tool of expansion, was repurposed into a weapon. Under the oversight of Director Malik Ibarra of Phoenix Project, the best minds of 3 species labored to construct the Aegis Array, a network of pulse field generators anchored to the gravitational hearts of nearby star systems. It would be a wall of energy and disruption, a bulwark against the advancing tide. But the array required time. And time was the rarest commodity. The entities classified by human command as wraith constructs did not move with the deliberate malice of an invading army. They spread like wildfire, seemingly indifferent to the difference between human, Shar, Lithari, or council systems. Entire sectors winked out of contact, their stars dimming as if devoured from within. Desperation gave birth to innovation. Siang Ileana, commanding from the mobile fortress TSV Bastion, authorized the deployment of the Vanguard Doctrine. Rapid strike groups armed with prototype weaponry, operating independently to harass, distract, and delay the Wraith's expansion. New technologies born in the crucible of crisis surged to the forefront. Gravimetric inversion bombs, quantum lances capable of pinning Wraith nodes temporarily, resonance fields that could disrupt their shifting geometries, each weapon bought precious hours, days at most. Humanity bled in the shadows of dying stars, but they endured. Meanwhile, political shockwaves rippled through the remnants of the Council of Insight. The Orders had watched humanity's defiance with disdain. Now they watched with growing dread as wraiths breached their borders, consuming once sacred worlds in silence. Their vaunted fleets, so finely tuned for wars of doctrine and containment, shattered like glass against the formless onslaught. The Shard baronies collapsed within months, their crystalline citadels fractured and absorbed. The Thauran Dominion, ancient and aloof, sealed its core worlds behind gravitational labyrinths and broadcast no further messages. Some among the Orders turned toward humanity, seeking alliance. Envoys from the Surun Dreamlords arrived at the Lunar Assembly, cloaked in sorrow and desperation. They offered knowledge, ancient data concerning the Wraiths, fragments of forbidden lore long hidden even from their own people. Elise Vance, speaking again for humanity, accepted their offer. But she demanded terms, full disclosure, full equality, no hierarchies, no secret dominions. The Dreamlords, faces shrouded in swirling mist, bowed low. Pride no longer shielded them, survival eclipsed all. From their revelations came understanding. The Wraith constructs were not a new threat, they were remnants of an ancient war predating the rise of any known civilization. In the time before memory, a species known only as the Architects had waged war across dimensions themselves. In their final cataclysm, they unleashed the Wraiths, a biotechnological weapon beyond control, left to fester in the void. The Orders, it was revealed, had known of the threat. Their entire policy of galactic stagnation, of containment and slow decay, had been born from fear of awakening the ancient danger. In their arrogance, they had believed silence would suffice. But humanity's rise, with its chaos and innovation, had disturbed the old balances, not caused the Wraiths but hastened their return. Now there was no turning back. Armed with this new knowledge, humanity set into motion their final gambit, Operation Crucible. While the Aegis Array continued construction, while Vanguard forces bled to slow the advance, humanity would strike at the rift source itself, not merely to seal it but to weaponize it. The Phoenix Project designed the Rift Lance, a theoretical construct capable of collapsing Wraith fields into singular points, chaining destruction across their collective consciousness. It was untested, it was unproven, and it required direct insertion into the heart of the rift. The mission was simple and impossible. A volunteer fleet comprised of the best Terran, Shar, and Lithari vessels would pierce the Wraith-dominated Ross 248 system, deliver the lance into the rift, and trigger detonation. Command fell inevitably to Siang Ileana. The operation, codenamed Iron Requiem, began. The fleet launched from the forge yards of Titan, a spearpoint of all that humanity and their allies had built, salvaged, and dreamed. They bore the hopes of countless worlds already burning behind them. The journey to Ross 248 was a nightmare. The Wraith sensed them, reacted to them. Constructs of shifting chaos descended upon the fleet, blinding sensors, tearing at shields, distorting mass and time. Ships winked out of existence mid-transit. Whole squadrons were swallowed by impossible geometries. But the fleet endured. Through fire and loss, they reached the edge of the rift. There they saw it, an abyss within the stars, a gaping wound where reality bled into nothingness. Around it coiled the wraith constructs in endless birth and death. Time distorted. Space folded. And Xiang Iliana gave the final order. The TSV Bastion, mortally wounded but defiant, plunged into the rift's edge, carrying the rift lance at its core. No escape was possible, no return was expected. The lance detonated. Reality screamed. Across Ross 248, across human colonies, across council bastions, the wraiths faltered. Their geometries shuddered, their forms collapsed inward, devouring themselves in silent implosions. The rift at Ross 248, after a moment of infinite distortion, sealed with a thunderous shockwave that echoed across dimensions. In its wake, silence fell. Humanity had gambled existence itself and won. But the cost was written in the names of the dead, in the wreckage drifting like funeral pyres through the stars. The Aegis array, now completed, locked down the wound sites across human and allied sectors, preventing further incursions. The Council of Insight, what remained of it, sent envoys not with treaties of dominance, but of apology. The orders who had once sneered at humanity now looked to them as architects of salvation. The Terran Accord stood at the center of a shattered, rebuilding galaxy. But humanity was no longer content to simply survive. The forge of human hands had shaped more than weapons. It had reforged the destiny of countless species. No longer would stagnation and fear rule. A new era was dawning. One lit by the fire of worlds reborn. One where humanity was not a backwater species, but the very pulse of a galaxy awakening. In the aftermath of the Rift War, the galaxy stood broken and raw. The ancient hierarchies were gone, shattered not by conquest, but by their own inaction and cowardice. Worlds once chained under the banners of stagnation were free, but freedom was an open wound. Economies collapsed, trade routes died, local wars flared like brushfires among desperate survivors. The ashes of old empires drifted through the void. Humanity did not retreat into triumph. They advanced. The Terran Accord, tempered by survival and sacrifice, evolved into the Nexus Assembly, a coalition not just of humans, Shar and Lithari, but of dozens of newly liberated species. It was not built on coercion, nor the hollow promises of old councils. Its foundation was simple, a covenant of builders, defenders, and dreamers. The Assembly's first act was not to seize dominion, but to rebuild. The forge fleets, born from Earth's battered industries and new hybrid technologies, spread outward. Planetary reclamation vessels, atmospheric reseeders, and orbital construct arrays lit the skies of dead and dying worlds. Star systems scarred by wraith incursions were healed, their skies seeded once more with the breath of life. Yet even amid the rebirth, old threats lingered. Pockets of the surviving orders tried to cling to their obsolete power structures. Some clashed with assembly expeditions, unwilling to surrender their illusions of superiority. Some turned to piracy, using remnants of forbidden technologies to terrorize isolated colonies. Humanity responded without hesitation. The new interstellar defense wings, flexible and autonomous, deployed surgical strike groups to dismantle the last tyrannies. There were no declarations, no grand speeches, only the steady, methodical removal of threats to the new future. Among the assembly, new leaders rose from unexpected quarters. The Lithari elder HFY, whose people once shunned interstellar politics, became the architect of the Nexus Code, the guiding law of the assembly, forbidding any centralized authority from ossifying into tyranny. Shar Queen Regent Israk, matriarch of the unified hives, oversaw the integration of biosynthetic technologies into every aspect of assembly life, allowing symbiosis between biological and mechanical worlds. And among humans, figures like Ambassador Elise Vance, now first chair of the Assembly Council, forged new pathways of diplomacy where once only conquest and suppression had ruled. But the true catalyst remained in the hands of those forged by fire. The next leap in human evolution was not biological, nor technological, it was cultural. For the first time, humanity ceased to define itself by old borders, old flags. The Earthborn, the Marsborn, the outer colonists, even distant stellar pioneers, all saw themselves as part of a single tapestry, not erasing their differences but celebrating them as facets of a unified forge. The Wraith War had burned away the illusions of separateness. In its place, a living network of thought, will, and ambition spread outward. It was humanity's greatest strength: unpredictability, adaptability, the refusal to accept imposed limits, and now it was the blueprint for a galactic renaissance. Centuries-old relics were rediscovered and repurposed. The archengines of the fallen shard barons were rebuilt, this time as habitat seeds capable of terraforming entire moons. The crystalline thought cores of Surun Dreamlords were linked into open-source neural libraries, accessible to any citizen of the Assembly. The Assembly Charter codified the right of all sentient beings to innovate without fear, an idea so radical, so fundamentally disruptive, that many surviving orders still could not comprehend its power. Yet humanity pressed on. They launched the Horizon Armada, not a fleet of conquest but of exploration. The edges of the galaxy, once regarded as dangerous, uninhabitable wastes, became frontiers of possibility. Warp tunnels stabilized across impossible distances. Dyson frameworks rose like skeletal gods around aging stars, harvesting energy to power the dreams of 1,000 species. From the ruins of fear, humanity had created a civilization based not on the control of knowledge, but its liberation. Yet even as they expanded, they never forgot. Memorial spires were erected on worlds scarred by the wraiths, bearing the names of the fallen. The shattered hull of the TSV Bastion, recovered from the rift debris, was enshrined on Titan's Forge Square, where pilgrims from 100 worlds left offerings in gratitude. The memory of Siang Ileana and all those who had hurled themselves into oblivion so others might live was burned into the Assembly's very bones. Their sacrifice was not an ending but a beginning. New voices joined the chorus. The Riskar clans, long enslaved to Thauran harvest fleets, took to the stars with ships of living metal. The Overland nomads, once thought extinct, re-emerged from the black gulfs beyond known space, bearing songs of forgotten histories. Each edition strengthened the Assembly. Each new world added another note to the Forging Hammer's song. In the vast halls of the Nexus Assembly headquarters, built in orbit around the reborn Earth, a single motto was inscribed above the Grand Conclave. We are the hands that shape tomorrow. No single power ruled. No voice dominated. Instead, the Assembly worked in symphony, driven by the restless, ceaseless fire humanity had first sparked. There were threats still, out in the darkness. Shadows older than wraiths, mysteries wrapped in the far reaches where even human boldness hesitated to tread. But now they would not face them alone. They would not face them as a broken, stagnant people. They would face them as the architects of a galaxy reborn, wielding unity, will, and infinite ingenuity as their tools. The alien eyes that once saw Earth as a primitive speck now looked upon humanity with awe and, for the first time, understanding. Where once they had seen a backwater species, they now saw the forge of 1,000 stars. And the hands of humanity, scarred, battered, and unyielding, would shape not only their own destiny, but the destiny of the galaxy itself.